Chapter 42, Knee-High Temples. Get thee up into the top of Pisgah, and lift up thine eyes westward, and northward, and southward, and eastward, and behold with thine eyes, for thou shalt not go over this Jordan. But charge Joshua, and encourage him, and strengthen him, for he shall go over before this people, and he shall cause them to inherit the land which thou shalt see. Tanakh. Bill said walking the beach one night, I hate it when the Beatles say, in strawberry fields nothing is real. It is so fucking wishy-washy. I mean, if nothing is real, then real has no meaning. The war criminals' sons say there are tigers up on the volcano. They mean jaguars. They've never seen them. They only see signs. And it's said that you never see a jaguar if it doesn't want you to see them. So are they real? I've seen my tiger hunt, real as day, but everybody says visions aren't real, whether it's with eyes open or closed. I wish I could say what's real is what you're willing to see. There's truth in it, but there's also tigers. But I've been to church one too many times to not see the bullshit. All you gotta do is spend a minute watching someone talking in the tongues of angels to know they know it isn't real. They fake it to make it real, to make the groupthink real. That's what their faith is, groupthink. That's the world they're willing to see. I've got more respect for the snake handlers. They put their money where their mouth is. We're all animals. What is real is what you fear. The handlers are playing the game of fear for real, tossing those rattlers around. The other Christians are just hiding from Satan's snake, Adam's dick. I said, John told me in Fayaway that fear is the game played in this place. He said Pedro de Alvarado was the original gringo, the first one to gallop his armored horse down this very beach in 1519 to scare the shit out of people like the mouse. He also climbed a volcano by Mexico City to frighten all the locals there, more than they already were, and had the volcano put on his coat of arms. He was the ultimate fear gamesman. In the conquest of Guatemala, he got into this fear game to the point where he was said to be living off human hands. Imagine what nibbling human fingers every day does to your fears. He pampered and overfed his horse, which was his faith and security. But that horse fell on him and killed him in a battle on the steep hills of Acapulco. He was on his way to conquer Japan. No one could say he didn't think big. John said he looked like a murderous nut in a portrait he saw in a book. The temples on the volcano were called Quiahuitztli, he said. They looked out to sea, and so the priests were the first ones to see Cortez's ships. They took them to be winged and feathered serpents, bringing the return of Quetzalcoatl, a god who represented the cycle of creation and destruction, life and death, and so was not only the bird of freedom and beauty, Quetzal, but also Coatl, the snake of the earth and the underworld, coming in the form of steel-scaled Cortez and Alvarado, who arrived flying on the air in winged ships. And John said the old-time inhabitants of these temples were dwarves, with teeth filed to a point, barely open eyes, and flat oval heads with big ears. They wore embroidered cloaks with panels of jade plates sewn on them. They got high ceremonially, using hallucinogenic enemas. Then they would commit ritual sodomy, bleed them out with a stingray spine, before they cannibalized their sacrificial victims. They preferred to eat teenage boys. They collected them as tax on their vassals. They'd put them in cages to fatten them up. They used to have skull racks outside of town, sometimes with 100,000 skulls on them. But in a little place like the one up on the volcano, he bet it was more like 1,000 on a rack. As we ascended the mouse's path from the beach, he said, "Let's go tonight." I could feel him smirking in the moonlight. When we got back, Bill doled out a massive Diablo solvent, but we didn't take it in some Aztec's enema. So stepping from the squat, I puked and laid down, out from under the tile roof, under the full influence of the dome of stars, with the nearly full moon in ascent. And the whole 40-day death and rebirth march started down a new path, as the ancient moon rose higher. My body and soul felt as disquiet as the frothing sea at the rocks, churning and sending up echoes from that boiling cauldron 100 feet below. Every syllable in every thought coming up from the waves was the fear. I realized Bill had spooked me from the day I met him. Like a snake spooks a horse, he made me jumpy, and that made me want to please him. Why, I don't know. I bet he could see the whites of my horse's eyes all round the pupil, snorting and shaking my head. And it didn't help when he said again, "Come on, let's go tonight." Feeling timid, staring at the moon straight on, I said, "I can't. You gave me too much. I can't move. I'm paralyzed." Bill came and stood over me, the wild snakes of his hair blocking the moon, giving him a slithering aura. What crap? I wiggled my toes in my untied boot to make sure I wasn't paralyzed. We'd get lost for sure, finding our way, tripping in darkness. I've been up there before, iguana hunting with the war criminal's sons when you were in Mexico City. I didn't believe him. The war criminal's sons were forbidden to hang out with us star jockeys. But I listened to him talk his bullshit as he told me the way, standing over me like some shaman Svengali, both of us in a credulous trance, concocted of reactionary fear and jaded doubt. I absorbed the moonlight like a corpse, willing to go with him on the mind's television. Still, my body was rebellious, my legs still, unable to take my tattered carcass into the antique moldy corruption of those dwarf-killing temples. Man, come on. Every time you give in to fear, your fear only grows stronger. Fear is a cancer made of fear. You gotta hunt it down and kill it. I sat up, his southern cavalier twang talking me out of my head, but not out of my fear. And before I knew it, I was walking, traveling in the left dimension where the hummingbird is supposed to be heard, to the separate place, so imperiled by presumption and strange fire, up into the moonlight, cleansing my brain, all the while living in Bill's bullshit. Feeling myself a child, both lost and found, leaving my rock in the midst of the womb of sea, endangered by my own arrogance of invention, yet following Bill by mind into delusions of former times that were never in memory as they actually were. I was well spooked as we set out into the shadows, reluctantly headed for the fabled temples of slaughter. I could smell the snakes in the bushes, hear the night birds. Bill set out intrepidly, and I followed on behind, both still fixed in merciful moonlight. Along and across the road, through the war criminal's barbed wire fence, and up into his cow field, strangely flattened by the moonlight. Up and up we went, over tufts of grass the cows didn't like, panting after a while. Up to the very minor path the war criminal's sons supposedly showed Bill, into that ominous bramble, moist and full of sounds I'd heard from afar. But now I was hearing them close, and they were very strange to me, made by unknown birds and outlandish insects. Into the darkness we went, as the bramble became a low forest, with puddles of moonlight like jaguar spots, whitening the dead things crunching beneath our feet. Past side foothills with dogs barking, and over small fields around tiny jacals, where the frightened inhabitants listened to us pass, amid their dried walking for a long time in a mirage of visions. The gut-wrenching solvent was past full-blown when we finally discerned the temples in the moonlight, which warped even the familiar into the lunar and strange. But there was nothing familiar there to me in the first place. Not a plant, not any shadowy form, nor soft noise. Only the white moon was a color I recognized, but the moon's smell was different, some kind of lunar mold. Under the trees in the moon-dappled light, it was hard to see these forms as temples, a small avenue of tiny shrines, comic but menacing. Bill wandered in the shadows and around the temples, but I was drawn beyond, and I ascended like a somnambulist up to a flattened promontory that goats or something had cleared, eating it down around a stake to the tropical ground cover of coarse miniature blades. A perfect circle atop this square temple, and I lay my head in the absolute epicenter where the goat stake had been, with the universal tent peg stuck in my third eye. Forgetting the overpowering moon and the overgrown temple top that was in itself an imagination, an old science based in old priestly wishes, becoming the old demands of the old minister's con, entirely forgotten by almost all. Now I was ignoring it, transfixed by a singular star in the absolute midpoint of the sky, a plumb line of light coming down from the star to a point between my eyes, perpendicular to the horizontal edges of the circle that held me at its center, on a level arcing plane, even with the stars at the horizon where the sea met the sky. Oblivious to the illusory chiggers with their brush titles creeping on me, I received a download on this magical celestial machine in the slow revelations of time through evolution, in all the animal behaviors I was living out amid the billions of life cycles, minutes melding to years. Forgetting the image of the edge of the overgrown circle and the volcano's core rising up, perhaps the birthplace and quarry of Coatlique's basaltic self, out of a vertical basalt face of hexagonal columns towering beside me, the white lines of moonlit waves miles away moving in below, and the sky gently adrift. And the fear leaked out the back of my head and flowed down into the tent peg hole, down into the earth to be digested and purified. And I became the sky and the horizon 1,000 miles off, white lines of sea-reflected milk of moonlight and stars like a trillion breasts. This was all me. The fear would walk the eternal fluorescent-lit linoleum sheen where fear lives in a gas of ammonia, forever locked in lost time. Until I heard Bill exclaim, "Motherfucker, a fucking ant is in my ear, biting my fucking eardrum." And this pulled me back to his world of ruckus and the squat, to the calamities Bill instinctively sought. He was banging his head with his palm and itching himself madly among the temples, over what I couldn't tell. I drifted back and descended the overgrown narrow steps into the scratch and scrape of the low forest, and stood among the mini masonry temple houses, flat-roofed doll houses, made for obdurate trolls of Bill's Hill. In one of the jaguar spots of moonlight, someone had laid out flowers and charred some corn, and the burnt skull of a small animal with buck teeth in the white ash of the Indian-sized fire long cold. A vague buck-toothed rodentine comprehension began to boil my brain. This blood-stained ground still boils me a little today, coming into my normal vision as a vestigial morphology, speaking from the dirt and the spirit of open animal graves, speaking directly into my nervous system, confounding all sense of chronos and magnetosphere, coming over that rude cut stone telegraph of those knee-high temples, exuding, projecting their priest-designed musty temperaments, pushed out into the cricket scratchings beneath those long oblique lines of moonlight, out into the night bird's slow warble, into the brambles of chiggers and snakes, and up to that extinct volcano's basalt-stopped hole. Knee-high temples almost hidden in the moonlit overgrowth, trying to shout over the quiet, surf-silent sea voice at the mouth of the sky, far off down a long conical tube. Once I heard that peculiar temple lingo, I couldn't stop its resonating in my head. Those voices lick and nibble my earlobes with rodentine teeth, whispering above the hurricane-bent palms, down in the pastures and screaming in the stillness, harmonizing with these miniature temple chambers, too small for the smallest of people, with nooks the size of a human head. Stone wind harps, singing as well as cut stones can sing, a whisper, no more, down and out to the open sea. The Gulf Stream pouring over the mountains on misty mornings, over the volcano, through their little temple mouth holes, or maybe backwards as the afternoon sea breezes go, pushing that voice back up into the ears of the chiggers and down the plugged throat of the volcano, passing through the orifices of these stone spirit generators that looked like models laid out in a miniature Grand Avenue, vast, tall temples in 1/100th scale, inventions devoted to sacrifice to the sun or moon or some horrifying goddess like Huatlicue. Tiny temple models of a lost system, without a mitered head to think it, or to functionally explore those particular reaches of the imagination that are just one edge of one world we saw there, at that threshold between a firm land and a liquid frothing sea, where new worlds are